I want to take a look at the concept of real options. Now, you may be familiar with financial options, call options or put options, which give you the right to, in the case of a call option, buy shares of stock at a specific price called the strike price, or a put option, which gives you the right to sell at the strike price regardless of what the actual price is. The difference here is that real options give management the right but not the obligation to undertake certain business opportunities. So, for example, a movie studio buys the rights to a best-selling book. The company's not obligated to make the movie, but they have the option to do so. A developer buys a piece of property, and they can choose to develop the property, but they're not obligated to do so. So these options have value and should be incorporated into a firm's decision making. Let's take a look at some of the types of real options. The option to expand. Here we have the option to make an investment or undertake a project in the future to expand the business operations. So, for example, a fast food chain considers opening new restaurants. You have an option to abandon. Okay, here you can cease the project or an asset to realize its salvage value. A manufacturer can opt to sell old equipment. The option to wait is the option of deferring the business decision to the future. For example, a fast food chain considers opening new restaurants this year or in the following year. The option to contract is the option to shut down a project at some point in the future if conditions are unfavorable. A multinational corporation can stop the operations of its branches in a country with an unstable political situation. The option to switch is the option to shut down a project at some point in the future if the conditions are unfavorable and resume it when the conditions are favorable. So an oil company can shut down the operation of one of its plants when oil prices are low and resume operation when prices are high. Let's take a look at a decision tree. This is usually a good example of how the decisions are made. So a movie studio buys the rights to a book. They want to possibly make the movie. What goes into their decision? Is the book a success? Okay, it's unlikely they're going to make a movie out of a book that is not successful, although that's not out of the question. It's possible that the movie will be better than the book. If the book is a success, they can still decide, don't make the movie. On the other hand, if the book is a success, they decide to make the movie. If they make the movie, it can be a failure or it can be a success. If it's a success, they may choose to make a sequel or they may choose not to make a sequel. So there are a lot of different options they have along the way. So many times a movie studio will contract with a director or producer to make a movie. And if it's successful, they have the right to ask for a sequel. If it's not successful, they can say, well, nobody watched the first film, so we don't want to make the sequel. In fact, that happened. Even when it's successful, sometimes they don't want to make the sequel. Many of you are familiar with the Star Wars franchise, and it's such a big success, it seems that it's obvious that, they would want to make a sequel and that it was going to be a great hit. But if you followed the track of the movie, George Lucas had a very hard time making the movie. He had production problems, and even after Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was a great success, he had a hard time getting the sequel made. Why? Because the person in charge of the movie studio changed hands. And all of a sudden, someone says, well, this isn't my baby. I don't want to make the sequel. In the end, they did wind up making the sequels, and many sequels, and have had a big franchise, and they've made a bunch of follow-up movies that are sort of not considered part of the Star Wars trilogy, or actually, I guess it's 6 movies now. They're considered a Star Wars story, and they also have a bunch of other, limited series that they're showing on Disney Plus, which owns the Star Wars franchise. So let's just take a look at how this affects things. So traditionally, the total project value has simply been the net present value of the project. But in a lot of ways, this is too conservative because there are other things involved here. There's an adjusted option value, okay, that option to do certain things. There's also value to abandoning, right? If you buy a piece of property, even if you don't want to think about corporations, you buy a piece of property, you're planning to build a house on it. For whatever reason, you decide not to build the house. Perhaps you've been transferred to a different city, so you're not going to buy the house. Well, the land doesn't just sit there. You don't have to build the house. You could sell the land, and that has value. In fact, sometimes you'll see people involved in certain activities where they'll say, look, if this doesn't work out, and I'll just sell the property, I'll probably get back most of what I paid for it. And all those other options, in the case of the movie business where you can make a sequel, or if you sign an author to a contract, right? If the first book is not a success, you may choose not to take advantage of the option to have a second book by that author. So using net present value alone tends to be a bit too conservative. So it's something to consider, and it can be difficult to value these option values, but it is something to consider, and in the future I'll perhaps tackle that issue. So I hope you found this helpful, and thanks for watching.